Hi, all. These are generally conversations between adults after the children have left the table. The language can be spicy and the subjects can get saucy. So if you're ready, this is the Southern Fork. Unscripted kitchen chats and also studio chats with some of the most interesting voices in the culinary South. I'm Stephanie Burt, a food and beverage writer who travels with her fork to write for a variety of publications, from magazines you might have on your coffee table to the website you love to visit for your favorite recipes. And I'm inviting you to come behind the scenes with me to get to know the people who make this Southern culinary landscape so special. I'm always hungry for the next bite, thirsty for that next sip, and ready for the next conversation. Let's dig in. In 1905, Saloon Columbia in Tampa, Florida, officially became Columbia Restaurant, a place helmed by Casimiro Hernandez Sr., where cigar workers in Ybor City could rest and enjoy Spanish and Cuban food or snag a sandwich to eat on the job. Through the years, the restaurant grew to envelop the entire city block. And today, the family-owned landmark is Florida's oldest restaurant and the largest Spanish restaurant in the world, with 15 dining rooms and 1,700 seats. Andrea Gonzmart Williams is the great-great-granddaughter of Casimiro Hernandez Sr., and she began working at Columbia about the age of 10 by doing some filing in the corporate office. She continued working in various positions through high school, and then after graduating from the University of South Florida, joined the family business full-time as the fifth generation of the 1905 family of restaurants. She is actively involved in the day-to-day operations of not only the flagship location in Ybor City, but also the other Columbia restaurant locations in Florida, the Columbia cafes at Tampa Bay History Center and Tampa International Airport, and other restaurant concepts within the company. But the Columbia isn't just a family tradition for those who work there and grow up in the business. It's also a traditional place of celebration for countless Florida families throughout the last 117 years. Welcome to the Southern Fork, Andrea.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm very excited to be able to sit with you here in part of what is the entire city block that is the restaurant, the Columbia restaurant here in Ybor City. And I'm just amazed at the legacy of this restaurant, but also the size. I mean, you were born here, basically. So do you ever stand back and go, whoa, this is big?
Growing up, I definitely took it for granted. I guess I thought everybody had restaurants that were the size of a whole city block. And then I think as I got older is when I truly appreciated it. And, every time I give a tour and I start with, it started out as a small corner cafe, and I always go in the order as the rooms were added on. I have a new appreciation for it, especially when I see people so dumbfounded by it, and then I love to loop them around, and then we end up back where the old kitchen was, and I'm like, and now we have walked a whole city block.
Oh, wow. Well, it's wonderful that the restaurant is a destination as well as a place to eat. It's a museum of sorts of this part of Tampa. I was looking last night on the menu and it said on the back, 1,700 people can fit in the restaurant.
15 dining rooms.
Have you ever filled everything?
Absolutely. Especially during the holidays, every single seat will have a butt in it.
Now, I have a lot of chefs that listen to the Southern Fork. Thank you so much, by the way, chefs. I appreciate you for feeding me and also for listening. But we are all wondering the same thing. How in the world do you feed all of those people in a service?
Well, by having a kitchen that's 6,000 square feet approximately.
Wow.
In 2001, we added what we still refer to as our new kitchen. When you've been around for over 100 years, that's new. And that really gave us the capability to feed that many people, to preserve our quality. Our old kitchen used to actually be on one end of the block. And so sometimes your food had to travel the whole block. But with the kitchen being on the back of the restaurant, I say it's got this hall that runs along the back of it. It's like the life vein of the restaurant. So it allows the food to get to whatever dining room it's going to really easily.
Wow. And each dining room has its own personality. And can you talk to me a little bit about the decor? I know that since everything was added on little by little, was it your family just putting up things that they loved? Did they have significance? Because there's so much art. There's so many articles there. I took a picture of a man with a cigar right at the front, right at the...
That was probably our founder's son, Casimiro Jr.
Yes.
He was known for smoking his cigars, and that was in our Siboney dining room, which had been our newest dining room up until about 2003. And that one was added, I believe, in the mid-50s.
Okay. Wow. Definitely. That is a very Mad Men photo to
Yes.
me. And I love that era, of photography and stuff. So I just was like, yeah, this is where I'm having to be today. But how do you decorate the rooms, and how do you decide, or how did your family decide that?
Well, so many of the dining rooms, I mean, specifically for me, came so much farther ahead of me. My father was born in 53. So even with the Siboney being built, it had already kind of been established. But I know when he got older, he did, the flooring in there was actually originally from Cuba. And my grandfather decided he didn't like it. So he'd covered it with carpet. And one day, when I believe my father was in his 20s, him and my uncle George, who's really not my uncle, but he's worked for us for like 60 years, so he's my uncle, they ripped up the carpet because they wanted to show it. So, little ways that he has made his imprint on it. The only room that I've really witnessed be added was the Andalusia room, which is off of the original cafe. And my parents went to Spain, and they found everything. They found the painted Spanish tiles there. Everything that is hung on those walls are all from Spain, the chandeliers. And then we were able to then use those chandeliers in the original room. So kind of intertwining it all.
Yeah.
But it's all about making sure we capture that feel of Spain. And every room, like you said, is so different.
So different. And mine included a stage.
Yes, well, for the flamenco dancers.
Yes. So I got to see my first flamenco show last night. It was beautiful. Man, they're really good too.
They're awesome.
Yeah, and it's the Tampa Bay Flamenco Company, right?
Yes.
Yes, and I tagged them on Instagram. Beautiful, beautiful dances, each one individually showcasing their own talents and then working together. But that's that very classic restaurant, old school feel. We're unabashedly old school here at the Columbia, right?
Yes, and we are very proud of it.
Yeah, so it's dinner and a show.
Yes, it is.
And there's also things that happen tableside, like the 1905 salad.
We do the sangria tableside. We do the 1905 salad tableside. We serve your paella tableside. In the evenings, we do arroz con pollo that's tableside. It was so sad right after COVID, we had to take all of that stuff away. And we were so happy when we slowly got to bring it back.
Yes, yes. Now, as someone who's literally grown up in the building, is there an early memory that you have of the kind of thing that you would always want to get from the restaurant when you were little? Because I can talk about the menu all day long, but I want to know what you think about the menu and which ones really connect to you.
When I was a little girl, my earliest memory is going to the flamenco show. My grandfather back then, he would play the violin every night before the flamenco show. So my grandmother would take my sister and I, and we would sit ringside and we would watch him perform. I had the biggest crush on one of the flamenco dancers. He was just so cute. That is probably one of my earliest memories. But I don't really remember what I ate when I was little. I was never a picky child. I remember in grade school, when I started working at the Columbia during the summer, I always worked like 4 weeks out of the summer as a hostess. I worked the cashier booth back when we used to have a cashier booth, which the thought of trusting me with money at 17 is scary. I would have never done that. You know what I love to eat? I would get a huge plate of yellow rice and platanos.
Yeah, which is plantains.
Yes. Now at 44, I don't think I could pull that off for lunch because I would be bigger than a house. But at 17, I could.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I love the plantains last night. I had the palomilla. I had the palomilla, and it was my birthday, and because I'm on tour, I was away from most everyone that I knew, but I've met so many people on the road, which is wonderful too. But I was like, I'm going to go for this large amount of onions.
It's so good.
Because no one is around me. I'm not going to have to be in 5 feet of anyone. And I could not finish it. And I have a cooler on the road, and my cooler now is going to smell like onions because I got it to go, and I'm going to eat it tonight on my next stop of the road. So I knew what I was going to get before I came in. And I will let you know that I get a lot of responses from Instagram, and a lot of the people that were responding last night were saying, oh, that was my family's special place, or that was the first time I dressed up fancy to go out with my family and stuff like that. How do you deal with being a service-oriented industry and taking care and making people feel special when there are so many people coming through the doors?
Well, I love when you said that, because when I hear that, it gives me goosebumps. And that is one of my most favorite things, to be able to walk through the dining room, which I usually do every single day at lunch, and talk to as many people as I can. And I get to hear stories like that. Oh, we got engaged at this table and we come every single year, or we had our rehearsal dinner here. I know for me, all of my special occasions happen at the Columbia. My daughter's baptism, confirmation, first communion, birthdays, they are always celebrated at the Columbia for the most part. And so that does put a lot of pressure on us, because other people are coming in and wanting to have that same experience. And, people call me, oh, can you get me a reservation? I really want to be treated like a VIP. And I tell them, of course you will be, but we try to treat everyone like a VIP. It's very important, because you don't know if someone's celebrating something sometimes.
And I looked around, and almost the table next to me was a birthday with the family. I knew that a table over there was a family birthday, and the little girl seemed about 13, and they were celebrating her birthday. And then I saw kind of people see each other for the first time in a long time. They all seems like family members, or they could have been fraternity brothers, but they were hugging, and
it's a happy place.
Yes.
It's a happy place. And even if you're there just dining to have dinner, that should still be a celebration.
Yes. Well, how do you talk to your staff about that? I know that we're in modern times, and staffing is always an issue, and it's hard in a shifting industry that we're in now. How do you help them get that heart for that?
Well, I think, we're so fortunate across the street, since we're at our corporate office, that so many of our employees have been with us for over 10 years. We have a dinner every other year celebrating our employees that have been with us 10 plus years.
Wow.
And it's reached a point that we have so many that we had to divide it into 2 nights, which is great.
Yes.
It's so important that when I walk through the restaurant, when my father walks through the restaurant, my cousin, whomever it is of the family members, I can't get through the hallways without hugging probably a dozen people, because the people that are in that restaurant are so much more just colleagues or employees. They've become family.
Right.
It is so important that they make sure they feel like they are a part of us, because they truly are. We couldn't do it without them.
I got the chance last year to talk with Ralph Brennan in New Orleans, and it feels that kind of iconic place, and the family history and the people that have been with the restaurant for a long time. It has that tradition, and it becomes part of the city, but beyond just being part of Tampa, you're specifically part of Ybor City. So I'd love to talk a little bit about that. How does the restaurant work with the larger community here, as far as telling the history, being part of tours, or any other way that culturally comes to mind?
We have been a staple here in Ybor City. We've seen some really good times. We've seen some really bad times. Ybor kind of does this little wavering where, it dips, but really I feel Ybor is going in an awesome direction. And I see Tampa trying to bring Ybor more in, with downtown now being connected with Sparkman's Wharf, which used to be Channelside. It's connecting it to Ybor City. And we're so fortunate that we partner with Visit Tampa Bay. They love to bring people to us and have lunch and expose us. The way I look at it, and we try to give back to our community as much as we can. We actually do an event every September called Community Harvest that we give back 4% of our check to nonprofit organizations of our customers' choice.
Mm-hmm.
Being that we've been here for over a century, we have to give back to our community that has supported us and has gotten us through the good times and the bad times. And they come back to celebrate their birthdays and their anniversaries.
Right.
I love that we are part of so many people's lives and so many memories.
Yes. And, this neighborhood now has a reputation, especially on Friday and Saturday nights, for being a huge party scene, like wild party scene.
It used to be wild when I was in college. Ooh, I loved it though.
I mean, we're talking Bourbon Street level, right?
Yeah, back in the day it really did because they used to shut the street down.
Right, right. And so how does that juxtapose with, little girls and little shiny patent leather shoes, coming out of a restaurant?
We are so lucky that I call us a bookend. We are not in the middle of all that craziness. Pretty much when you reach us, there's not much beyond us. So you are definitely away from that craziness. We've got lots of parking, so it's super easy to get in and out. So you can come down to the Columbia and not even know what is going on down the street from us.
Well, I hope it's Channing Tatum, because that's why I said yes to Tampa, and I haven't seen him yet. So
I'll let you know if I see him. I haven't seen him yet either.
I know. I'm aging myself at this point. But honestly, for a lot of people, that was their first really exposure to this really very vibrant, culturally important place in America, Ybor. And so you are very much multi-generational restaurant. You also are Cuban American?
So yeah, so the founder came from Cuba, but he originally started in Spain. So I always say we're Spanish with a Cuban flair.
Right. So let's dig into that a little bit. That story is past, right?
And I will say so many times they're like, oh, you're a Latina, or, you're Hispanic. And I'm like, I have a hard time identifying with that because, so yes, my great-great-grandfather did come from Cuba. My grandparents spoke Spanish when I would go visit them. My father is fluent. I'm not fluent.
Right.
My Spanish is probably about as good as yours.
I think it's probably better.
Maybe a little bit better.
I'm doing Duolingo, okay? I'm doing it. But yeah, I'm embarrassed about my Spanish. I mean, I should know more.
I should know more than as well. So, and so I'm struggling with my daughter, who's going to be 6th generation, to try to make sure, because she almost is in denial that she's Spanish. I'm like, baby girl, you are. Check out your 23andMe. But it's important to me that I make sure I still cook those dishes for her, and that I, bring her to the Columbia. And trust me, sometimes I get we have to go to the Columbia, but she loves palomilla. So I get her there with the palomilla and the plantains.
It's always the plantains. They suck you in, right?
They do.
They suck you in. But yeah, I think that that's important because we can continue to talk about the story of your grandparents and the story of the multi-generations here. But this is your story now. And this is your daughter's story now. So I have to just ask, what is making you hungry? What are you interested in for the Columbia as you helm this next chapter of its legacy?
Well, when you talk about the Columbia, my father says he's trying to pass this torch, which he's not ready to pass that.
He's not
torch.
passing.
He's not passing yet.
You're like, hand it to me.
I'm not ready. No, I want him to stick around as long as he can. And there's a lot of stress making sure, because he said this, I don't want to be the one to mess it up.
Yeah.
That's a lot of pressure.
Mm-hmm.
Because he's done such a amazing job at making the Columbia restaurant thrive and all of the other concepts that he's come up with. And so my cousin and I, he always says, I can't do it without you and I can't do it without him. So we're kind of in it together as the fifth generation. And he's trying to groom his little girl who's only 5 years old though. But it is so important to try to make sure that they want to do it, because what happens if they don't want to do it?
And it happens a lot.
It does.
It is a legacy of family businesses. And that is a hard place to be, because you want your child to be happy and you also want your business that you've worked so hard and your family before you worked so hard to thrive and to be good. So you were born into this. How did you accept the mantle of the Columbia?
Well, my father always said from the very beginning, no pressure, you don't have to do it. I worked during the summer all throughout, grade school and throughout high school, because he wanted me to learn the discipline of working. It was not grooming me to want to do it. It was something, you need to work. You need to have the experience. And so when I went to college, he was like, no pressure. I actually tooled with the idea, well, maybe I want to be a school teacher. I decided I really didn't like kids that much. Why I only have one kid.
You're like, that's enough.
Yeah, I'm like, no. Yeah, no, one and done. That's what I joke around about. Someone to take care of me when I'm old. Yeah. And so there was never any pressure. But then when it came down to it, and I'm looking at all of my other friends and my sorority sisters stressing out about what they're going to do, I'm like, well, I would be foolish to not do this. Here I have this opportunity, and so when I graduated in 2001, I started in the kitchen. I was the first woman to work in our kitchen at the Columbia and Ybor. And
what was your station?
I worked every single station. So I started in prep. I did 2 weeks of prep. So I would leave smelling like an onion, because I would chop.
That's all you do.
What felt like hundreds of pounds of onions and green peppers. Did 2 weeks in prep. I worked the dishwasher for a few days. And then I did 2 weeks working the lunch line, where I would rotate through the grill, saute, fryer, pantry, expo. And then I did 2 weeks at night. And I originally thought I wanted to stay in the kitchen. I love to cook. It is a passion. It is my therapy. And when I first started, I was like, well, what are you going to pay me, Dad?
Yeah.
And I forget what it was. And I was like, wait, I have a college degree. I'm like, how are you going to only pay me that, like whatever it was per hour? And he looked at me and he goes, Andrea, I can't pay you more than the man who is working on the grill that has worked for me for 10 years. He goes, so that's what it is. And I'm like, got it.
Going to the corporate office.
And no. So actually, no, I didn't go to I wish I would have been that easy. No. So then I went into the restaurants. I became an assistant manager. I started our Clearwater location as an assistant manager, worked a long time in our St. Pete location when we had one there. I would commute to our Celebration location. So wherever they needed me, I worked. And I was working those not great hours.
Yeah.
I was doing the close on Saturday, opening on Sunday. And
that is really, of all the jobs, I always think that the assistant manager who has to usually do the schedule and do work with front of house and server schedules and call outs and dealing with the balance at the end of the night, stuff like that is really hard and one of the thankless jobs, because I was a server and we're all just like, oh, I hate this person. And you don't mean to, but you just all. So I know you can feel that energy, like, please leave the room.
I joked that I was like a professional babysitter.
We're all like, we don't want you around, but also we want you around because I need you to sign off on this day off here.
Oh, well, see, I was the one that I was always getting in trouble for fraternizing.
Oh, good. Yeah. I mean, you would have been a great manager, I'm sure. I'm sure that you were. And I had some really great ones too, but I had some ones that had, I had more than one that, had a cook problem. So
yeah, you see that.
You do see that. But anyway, I digress. So when you finally accepted this space, is there one aspect of this job that you are doing now that really meshes with a natural piece of your personality, kind of fits like a puzzle piece?
I mean, there's so much that fits so perfectly in with me, with what I do. I've got the blessing of that I handle our wine list. I handle our spirits. Who doesn't like to have to come up with new drink recipes.
Yeah, that's not bad.
I help with the recipe development with my dad. Love that, especially since I love to cook. So whenever I'm going out places or I'm traveling, I'm always trying to bring back ideas like he does. And then, of course, I love the human interaction. Sometimes, now that I'm in the corporate office, I get stuck at my desk and I'm like, I can't do this. And I'll go across the street just so I can talk to people.
Mm-hmm.
And whether it be our staff or our guests, that is truly, I could be in the worst mood when I walk into the restaurant, but when I leave, I'm always in an amazing mood.
And it's good business sense too, because sometimes you don't know what you don't know, and it's good to be in the space and to observe and to see what's working and what's not working and to be surprised. I bet you're surprised a lot.
Yeah, well, you always have to keep your eyes open. And the other thing is then when you're around your staff more, then they feel more comfortable to come to you, tell you if there's an issue or if they're having an issue with another employee. You make yourself more accessible to them.
Right. What is something keeping you up at night? Quick fire.
I'm a pretty good sleeper.
Well,
for the most part, I
that
really
makes one
am.
of us.
My dad stays up all night worrying about that stuff.
I get it. Okay, I'm not going to push the issue then. That's great.
Yeah, no, every now and then I'll have something, but I've really trained myself that I get up and like last night in the middle of the night, I was thinking about we're doing a dinner with or a lunch with Freddie No next week, Booker No's grandson. In the middle of the night, I started thinking about, who do I need to invite? Put it in my phone, put my phone down, went back to sleep.
That's great. That's great. I try to turn it off, and then there's a crest of the roller coaster, and if you kind of go over the crest, you're like, oh, now this is going to be an hour. This is at least an hour.
Yeah.
See, if you can catch it on the way up, you're good. Seems like you've got that plan. So, I've wanted to eat here. I can't tell you, probably for about 20 years. It has been way overdue. So I'm glad I've fixed that. But, you fed me well last night, and this is a question that is reserved just for Southern Fort guests, and it's my magic picnic basket question. So instead of a death row meal, I want to bring you some things that bring you life. So I have a magic picnic basket. With it, I can time travel. I can go back and ask and conscript anybody to make one more bite of something you'd just like to have. I can source for you, and I can cook a little bit too. And I'd love to put some favorite things in that basket. They don't have to go together. It doesn't have to be a picnic. But just some things for us to get to know you through the things that you like. And I know that's going to shift and change depending on the seasons and depending on where you've been and where you're interested in going. But what can I put in that basket for you today?
Today, because it does. Everyone's always like, what is your favorite thing on the menu? And more times than not, I have lunch every Friday at this networking lunch. It's table 100 at the Columbia in the cafe. And I get caught doing eeny, meeny, miny, moe. I do that at the Columbia. I do it mostly every restaurant I go to because I'm very indecisive because there's so much on the Columbia menu that I love. As simple and as ridiculous it may seem, one of my guilty pleasures is the Cuban sandwich. And I never eat it because I'm trying not to weigh 1,000,000 pounds.
It's not low-cal.
It's definitely not low-cal, but it's so delicious. And as basic it is, I love a 1905 salad, but I don't like it with the ham. I like it with the turkey.
Ah, yeah, I get that. Now, away from the restaurant, is there stuff that that you had growing up or stuff that you've had on your travels that
growing up, my mom cooked really basic, normal, because people are like, oh, did you grow up eating chicken and yellow rice? I didn't. I grew up eating beef stew.
Yeah.
Every now and then she would make like ropa vieja, but we ate very normal, lots of pasta because my dad was always a triathlete and so he was always training. Favorite food?
Or restaurants that you
I hate when people ask me that. It's always like, I don't know about you. I know with my husband, it's like, where do you want to eat? Where do you want to eat? And we're like, oh, here we go. We're going to do this again. Sadly enough, if I want to eat something that I know it's going to be good, I like to cook at home. I do a lot of cooking at home.
Okay.
This week, my daughter's actually in North Carolina at camp. My husband just left today for a conference, and I've got all my meals planned out.
Where are you cooking?
I've been on a chicken kebab kick lately.
Ah.
So I've got 2 different chickens marinating right now. So yesterday I was like, what am I going to marinate this in? And I was like, maybe I'll try like a 1905 salad kind of throwback to kebab. So I did lots of garlic, olive oil, lemon. I put some Worcestershire in there and oregano. And literally I show my husband, I go, look, it's going to be 1905 chicken. And he's like, why are you making it without me? I'm like, sorry, I'll let you know how it turns out.
That's great. Well, sometimes the best food that you can have is the food that you cook yourself.
Yes.
Right? And it is part of the joy of it.
And I love Mexican food. So I'm planning what I'm going to cook for him when he gets home. And I'm like, well, maybe I'll make chicken enchiladas. Because it's hard to find good Mexican food. So you just have to make it yourself.
That's great. Well, if people want to learn more about Andrea and her family and this beautiful, iconic Columbia restaurant that we're sitting across the street from in the corporate offices, you can go to thesouthernfork.com. I'm going to have links there like I always do. So you can see the images of the face behind the voice. Also this beautiful food and space. If you like what you hear, the South is really delicious and there is beauty and story and history around every corner, especially when you start at the plate. So thank you so much for spending time with me and chatting with me, and even when I have my dog with me.
It's been my pleasure.
Hello and welcome to Talking with My Mouth Full. Now, I promised you Ybor City, some more Ybor City content, and Columbia Restaurant really is just a crown jewel of the Tampa city, but it definitely is an anchor for Ybor City. I had the opportunity to actually explore Ybor City a little more, and I really wanted to dig into something that Andrea mentioned, which is the Cuban sandwich. If I had to name one iconic Tampa food, it is the Cuban sandwich. And during my brief time in Tampa, I heard a lot of differing opinions about the best Cuban sandwich. It's like, for me, the best fried chicken, right? And so a lot of people had a lot of opinions. So that meant I just couldn't have just one. And Columbia is known for their Cuban sandwich. Also in Ybor City is La Segunda Central Bakery. That is also a family-owned business. It's fourth generation, and La Segunda Central Bakery produces 18,000 loaves of Cuban bread daily. Now, if you're a fan of the Cuban sandwich, then you know that the bread is very, very important. It's kind of like that po' boy, right? It's got to be a certain kind of bread for the po' boy. Well, it has to be a certain kind of bread, this Cuban bread for the Cuban sandwich. And La Segunda Central Bakery bakes 18,000 loaves of it a day, and they wholesale it to many restaurants. So you probably have had it somewhere in the South if you have had a Cuban sandwich from a lot of my chef friends. Let me tell you, when I visited La Segunda on a Sunday, it was packed. Everybody knew what they wanted. They knew how to order. There were a lot of people in the waiting room there, not waiting room, but like just the service area. There isn't table seating. It's just a pickup place. People were getting bakery goods. They have a lot of like sweet confections like cookies and pastries. And they also just sell the bread. And y'all, these loaves of bread are very big. They're very long and skinny. And then, of course, the Cuban sandwiches, and you can get them pressed or not pressed. There's a whole debate on that. I definitely went for the pressed sandwich. A lot of my chef friends immediately started reaching out when they saw that I was at La Segunda, and they started sharing their experiences with this bread and how important it was for them to visit the bakery and also to actually end up ordering that bread for their versions of their Cuban sandwiches. So definitely some people that you've heard on this podcast before. And I waited in line. I was really overwhelmed when I went in there, and I had to kind of get my bearings because, when you go in these places, you need to be prepared. And I was very unprepared at that moment, but a little bit of a Cuban sandwich and I was set right and ready to explore Ybor City for the afternoon. So there's a lot to explore. It depends if you're like a club nightlife person or if you're a brewery person, if you're a history person. And even if you're an eater like me, Ybor City, very, very interesting place to spend an afternoon. And of course, fueled by Cuban sandwiches. Thanks so much for listening, and I look forward to chatting with you again next week.
You've been listening to The Southern Fork. I can't wait to bring you more culinary conversations, but in the meantime, I have one question. Are you going to eat all that?